Within my State Department emails, there is a July 19th email. This email was sent to Secretary Pompeo, Secretary Perry, Brian McCormick, who is Secretary Perry's Chief of Staff at the time, Ms. Kenna, who is the who is the Executive Secretariat for Secretary Pompeo, Chief of Staff Mulvaney, and Mr. Mulvaney's Senior Advisor, Rob Blair. A lot of senior officials. Here is my exact quote from that email. I talked to Zelensky just now. He is prepared to receive POTUS's call. We'll assure him that he intends to run a fully transparent investigation and will turn over every stone.
EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland said a number of people, including Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, were in the loop about an attempt to trade military funding to Ukraine for an investigation of President Trump's rivals. Pompeo was asked about this while in Belgium earlier. He said he will not recuse himself from decisions involving documents provided to Congress on Ukraine.
I didn't see the testimony. I'm not going to recuse myself from this. I know precisely what American policy was with respect to Ukraine. I was working on it, and I'm incredibly proud of what we've accomplished. We delivered remarkable outcomes for the Ukrainian people, and I hope that we're able to continue to do so.
For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News State Department and Foreign Affairs reporter Christina Ruffini. Christina, thanks for being with us. So during Sondland's testimony today, he pushed back on the idea that he and others formed an irregular channel on Ukraine policy. Let's listen to what he said about that.
Did anyone else express any concerns to you about this so-called irregular channel?
I'm not sure how someone could characterize something as an irregular channel when you're talking to the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, the Chief of Staff of the White House, the Secretary of Energy. I don't know how that's irregular. If a bunch of folks that are not in that channel are aggrieved for some reason for not being included, I don't know how they can consider us to be the irregular channel and they to be the regular channel when it's the leadership that makes the decisions.
So, Christina, what do you make of this?
I think we make a couple things. First of all, you have to remember that Sondland is a political appointee. Unlike the other people we've heard testify, George Kent, Ambassador Taylor, who are career diplomats and have had this kind of training and are very, very steeped in bureaucracy for better or worse, Ambassador Sondland was a hotel guy. You know, he donated $1 million to President Trump's inaugural committee, and the reward for that was he got to be ambassador to the EU. You know, it's not a bad purchase when you look at it. However, the result of that might have been if you'd had a more experienced person in that post, they might have known sooner or noticed sooner that this is not the way this usually goes, right? As he testified, he's like, well, you know, I was talking to the Secretary of Energy. He said he was talking to the Secretary of State. That to him seemed like a regular channel, right? Who was he to argue with these cabinet officials to say that this wasn't the way things should be going? And he didn't, for better or worse, he didn't seem to know any better. Sources who I've talked to who know him describe him as an enthusiastic puppy, really wanted to get things done, really wanted to get the policy done, but, you know, maybe won't always sit where you tell him to.
So, Christina, what does this mean, though, for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo? He has been totally unwilling to discuss the investigations in any capacity when reporters ask him about it. Is he now going to have to answer some hard questions?
Well, I was one of those reporters on Tuesday. My colleagues and I in the briefing room, 3 of us tried to get him to answer a variety of different questions, especially about the building. You know, he's tried very hard to distance himself from this, but the problem is the key witnesses are his employees. They're State Department officials. They're high-ranking State Department officials. He said he wasn't going to talk about, you know, the Democrats' impeachment proceedings, and he was here to, you know, he was only going to talk to us about policy, and he was happy to talk about Ukraine policy, which he said had been very successful. So I then asked, okay, you know, Mr. Secretary, if you're willing to talk about Ukraine policy, do you think Ambassador Taylor is still, you know, an effective envoy of that policy since the president had lambasted him on Twitter? and he wouldn't answer the question. I asked another question as well, and I asked twice, and he said, thank you, everybody, and walked out of the room. So he's been really reticent to engage, and that's partly because of the really difficult position he's in, right? He wants to show the building that he supports them and he supports his people. So on Tuesday, we got a statement from him that said, of course, I always support the State Department. It's the best diplomatic corps in the history of the world. But he won't answer any specific questions, and that's because his boss, the president, is really unhappy with those people he's in charge of. So he's got Trump up here unhappy with him, and the rank and file at the State Department down here unhappy with him, and he's getting squeezed a little bit in the middle.
He's definitely feeling the heat. So, Christina, what is the reaction from the State Department over Gordon Sondland's testimony today?
So the State Department, the Secretary is overseas at the moment, and the State Department issued a statement pushing back. One of the things Sondland had said is he's not a note taker like these career people. He doesn't take notes. He doesn't have logs. And so he needed to refresh his memory. He revised his testimony in a couple places today, and he said one of the things that would have helped him be more forthcoming or more accurate the first time is if he'd had access to his call logs and his emails, something he says the State Department won't give him because they've refused to comply with the subpoena. The State Department then pushed back. The spokesperson, Morgan Ortega, sent a statement that basically said he's still the acting ambassador to the EU. He has access to his phones and his emails and everything else, so that's just completely not true.
He could do a little digging into his own inbox
right.
there. He
could start searching Outlook. It might take him a while,
right.
but he could do it.
So a lawyer for Sondland confirmed that he is not resigning, and he's heading right back to work. He said he was following President Trump's orders. Is that a critical revelation? I mean, do we know whether he's lost the confidence of the president at this point?
We don't know. And if you think about it, we now have two very active figures who might not be supported by the president they represent, right? We have Gordon Sondland, who I would imagine the president isn't thrilled with him, although we haven't heard it as directly as we have had him come after Charge d'Affaires, who's the acting Ukraine ambassador, Bill Taylor. Again, I just said we don't know. They wouldn't answer me when I asked if Bill Taylor still had a job. And Ambassador Sondland seems to think he has a job, as he was, caught by other reporters' cameras smiling, getting on his plane back to Brussels. But we don't know. But it would be difficult for American foreign policy. There are a lot of ambassadorships that are still open. That's for a variety of reasons. The president said it's because Democrats are blocking it. It's also because they haven't nominated as many people, although Secretary Pompeo, to his credit, has been better about pushing through some of those nominations than his predecessor. But to lose both the EU ambassador and the guy in charge of Ukraine policy would be a hit to America's goals overseas.
Now, David Hale also testified today. He's, of course, the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs at the State Department. He says he was told the order to withhold aid from Ukraine came directly from President Trump, but he was told that. The president did not tell him himself. So did we learn anything significant from his testimony? Was it just a little bit more hearsay?
Well, he said he learned it at a different time than he'd originally said. He said he misspoke when he originally said he learned it was on hold in June. Now he said he learned it on July 21st, which is right about, I think it's the same day as that phone call. So there's some more questions about how he learned that and how the people who were telling him that hold was coming directly from the president, how they found out and where that information came from. People I've spoken to at the State Department again and again, even in the office that approves this kind of military aid, tell me they honestly didn't know why it was being held up. At first, they thought it was just bureaucracy, and then as it started to march towards this deadline where they weren't going to be able to get it out the door in time, they started to panic a little bit, and then when it went through, they figured, oh, it's fine, it's the building, it's just how it happens, until the transcript of that call was released and this all started breaking open.
So interesting. Well, Christina Ruffini, we thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.